So you want to be a therapist. Hi, my name's Allyssa Powers and I'm a therapist in private practice. I teach you the things they don't teach us in grad school so you can thrive as a mental health professional. So becoming a mental health therapist is not the most straightforward process because there are a couple different avenues that you could take and still do therapy. So for example, I'm an LPCC, so I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor in the state of Ohio. If you were in the state of California, you might be called a marriage and family therapist, but those are actually doing the same job. Now, on the other hand, social workers who are independently licensed can also do therapy. And then there's psychologists as well who can also do therapy. And the difference there is you need your doctorate to do so. So there's a couple different avenues that you could take. I took the clinical mental health counselor route because that was, to me, the most straightforward. I knew that I wanted to do therapy and be in private practice. So I didn't see the point in going the social work route or the psychology route because I definitely didn't want to get my doctorate. And there are some great YouTube videos on the pros and cons of getting your psych PhD. If you're interested, I can link those below. You will want to look for clinical mental health counseling grad programs. That's what my program was called. You're gonna wanna keep an eye out for a couple things. You wanna make sure that the programs you're applying to are fully accredited by CACREP. So sometimes if you're looking at fully online degrees, some sketchy things can happen. So you wanna make sure that this is indeed going to get you fully licensed as a mental health professional in your state. So clinical mental health counseling grad programs don't necessarily require you to have a specific kind of undergraduate degree. So I, for example, my bachelor's degree is in middle childhood education. If I knew what I knew now, I would not have chosen that degree. I do think the most common route I hear are people getting their psychology bachelor's, which would for sure help you in the long run because a lot of what we learn in grad school is repeated from what you would learn in a bachelor's of psych. But you don't have to do it that way. I actually am in private practice, and so there's a huge business element to what I do. And if I could rewind the clock and do it all again, I would have gotten a business degree because it's so versatile and because that's where a lot of the gaps are for me in my learning was that I never learned how to be a business owner from grad school. So you don't necessarily need a bachelor's in psych to get into a clinical mental health program. And I think that's a big misconception that I hear. Also, I didn't need to take the GRE. That probably varies by different universities and what they are asking for. But for my program, I just needed a specific GPA, a couple letters of recommendation, and then to pass the interview. Another misconception I hear about is that there are avenues you can take to become a therapist without getting your master's, and that is just not true. You are not able to get licensed without a master's degree. And on top of just your degree, you have to pass a licensure exam. And then 2 years later, when you are able to become independently licensed, you have to pass another licensure exam to be fully licensed. So there's lots of test taking involved, but if this is what you truly want to do, it's absolutely worth it to invest in your education and make sure you're going down the right path. Another misconception, and I've had people call me asking me if I'm a psychiatrist. So a psychiatrist is not a psychologist, not a therapist. A psychiatrist is a doctor who is specialized in prescribing mental health medication. I actually did not know the difference when I went into grad school. So also throwing it out there that if that's the side of things you are interested in, then you are definitely barking up the wrong tree, because we do not prescribe medication. You can, of course, advocate for clients to meet with a psychiatrist or a primary care doctor, but we have nothing to do with the medication process. So I wrote out a couple of things that I think you should take into consideration before applying to grad school to become a therapist. First thing is, do you enjoy talking to people? So much of our job is just connecting with people and being able to empathize with them. So if you are really drained by interacting with people, it doesn't mean you have to be the biggest extrovert in the world. There are so many great therapists that are very introverted, but on a baseline level, you have to want to talk to people, and oftentimes talk to people that aren't the best at making conversation. So that is huge to keep in mind. Another huge thing is empathy. Are you a naturally empathetic person? If you're not, that's definitely something to think about, because again, a huge part of what we do as therapists is providing our clients empathy and connection. My hot take, and this is just my opinion, but I think being successful as a therapist is about, 10% what you end up learning in grad school and 90% your personality and your ability to connect with your clients. I completely made those statistics up, but often when clients come to me and they just had a therapy experience that they didn't enjoy, the first thing they say is, I just didn't connect with the therapist. And that's huge. Another good thing to keep in mind is that we as therapists are not just giving advice all day long. In fact, we are taught in grad school to really stray away from giving advice, especially advice that's just our perspective. What we do as therapists is we want to lead our clients to their own truth and help them figure out what they want to do, instead of just giving them baseline advice. There are times where, of course, yes, if you're in an abusive relationship or something that's a little more black and white, where a therapist would have a very obvious answer to that, then of course it's an element. But I think we get a reputation as professional advice givers, and that is just not the case at all. So those are some common misconceptions to think about if you are wanting to go into any mental health profession, really, but specifically if you want to be a therapist. The last misconception that I hear is that you can't be a therapist if you yourself have mental health struggles or issues, and that is also just not true. A ton of people want to be therapists because they've been in therapy themselves and they've had a good experience, or they're just really interested in the topics, or they have a specific mental health disorder that they're passionate about wanting to treat. So I will say there are some caveats. You do have to, have dealt with some of your own stuff, gone to therapy yourself. You need to understand that you're not always going to be able to control what kind of content comes up. So it could be things like suicide, homicide, self-harm, things that can be very triggering, and you don't necessarily get the opportunity to say oh, sorry, I can't hear about that. You have to be there to hold the space for your clients. So there is some things to consider with what are your big triggers, and then what kind of clients would you be seeing? So the last thing I wanted to mention is money as a mental health professional. So this is one of my biggest passions, because I think it's totally possible to make a great sustainable income as a licensed counselor or therapist, but statistically, the averages are quite sad. I was researching how much therapists make on average. There's a huge range, because obviously you're not going to be making as much your first year as a therapist as you are your 30th year as a therapist. So it can range anywhere from $39,000 to $75,000 on average. That's a hard statistic to put out there, because I'm sure that also really depends on which state you are in, if you work in an agency, if you work in private practice or nonprofit. Every different avenue is so different. But I know when I was in grad school, I talked to a therapist that was already practicing, and I just asked her, like, hey, how much are you making a year? I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. And I think at that time, this was like 6 years ago, she said she started out at like 35,000. And I thought, oh no, I could make more as a teacher. Why am I spending all this money going to grad school? Not that it's all about the money, but it's something to consider because mental health professionals are just notoriously underpaid. So I would do your research. I would really recommend talking to someone in your area who's already doing a job in the mental health field that you think maybe you'd be interested in. Therapists are typically really nice people and they want to talk and share. So even shooting an email over and saying, hey, could we chat about, what you like and don't like about your job? I'm thinking about going to grad school. That I've gotten calls like that, and I always try and make it a priority because I'm passionate about helping people get into the field and also be happy in the field and thrive. So I think for my next video, I want to talk more about making money as a therapist and all the different avenues, how much money you can expect to make in your first year, in your 5th year, depending on, what kind of environment you find yourself in post-grad. I am very passionate about therapists making a living wage and not burning out from our field, because that's one of the biggest things that happen is therapists are really excited, they're in grad school, they're all hyped up to help people, and then they get into the field and they have way too many clients on their caseload, they're underpaid, they're overworked, and then they want to change careers because who wants to go through all that? I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe below. It would help my channel so much. This is my first video, so things might be a little clunky, and I know that I will get better the more that I practice, but I'm really excited to provide these resources on YouTube. I've loved watching YouTube for the longest time, and there aren't very many therapists talking about this stuff on here. I want to talk about more so the business side of therapy, how to get into the field, how to thrive in the field. I know there's a bunch of you out there that are aspiring therapists, and I would love if you stuck around. Thanks. Bye, guys.